Cool. I guess I'm live. That seems to be about right. Da, 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 da. Oh, my room is a mess. I wish I could stream from my other room, but I don't want to move my webcam, and I'm very, very lazy currently. Let's make sure everything's just as it should be. Okay. Well, I guess that means everything's right. I think. See why it wouldn't be. Okay. So what is this little green dot here? Is that just connection? Or is that my volume? I need to be louder? I don't know what the little green dot here is. I don't stream on YouTube that much. But yeah, I'm on YouTube, so there's that. And hopefully, if anyone's watching, it'd be nice. But if not, it's all good. I've been meaning to make this video anyway, so this is good motivation to do so. And hopefully I'll have a better setup that'll look nicer the next time I do it. But for the time being, we'll just be streaming some Dungeons and Dragons stuff, because I am very bored at home, as I'm sure a lot of you are too. It's very easy to get bored, and unfortunately my regular play group has been on hiatus for reasons. There's a lot happening, and now's a good time just to take some time and relax, have a place to come talk for a bit. Let's talk about D&D, because D&D is fun. And if you want to talk more or you want to get more involved, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at NotoriousDKS. I'll put a link somewhere. I'm also just streaming every so often on Twitch. I usually just play other video games. I'll put more links in the description there. And I think aside from that, we can get going and start talking about some other things. Let's talk D&D, guys. So I'm sure if you're watching this, you play Dungeons & Dragons. If not, well, first things first, let's talk a little bit about myself, because I need to talk about myself, because that makes me happy. So I've been a DM for Dungeons & Dragons for about 4 years now. I've run a few campaigns. I've had podcasts. There's my dog. There's my dog. There's my dog. He's chilling. But yeah, I've been playing D&D for a long time now. I've actually been playing D&D since 4th edition came out. So 2010, 2011-ish, around that time. So I've been playing for a long time, but I've been DMing seriously for about 4 or 5 years now. And it's been a lot of fun. And I get a lot of good feedback and questions, and people ask me about D&D all the time. So I figure I just get on YouTube and talk to people about Dungeons & Dragons. Why not? So I guess the important thing now is to talk about the books, because depending on, especially if you're a player, there's really only one book you need, which is the Player's Handbook. Simple, essential. It's very helpful to have. I don't know why my monitor is backwards. I feel like it shouldn't be, but maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just showing up backwards for me and it's showing right ways up for you. Let me know one way or the other. I'm going to guess it's showing up fine. There's my dog. There he goes. He's looking out the window for something. He's also very bored. So send my dog Leon some love. Oh, no, we're good. Okay, so they're showing right way up. Perfect. So Player's Handbook. If you're a player, this is pretty much all you need. Yeah, it's very useful. It has all the classes, all the races, all the things that you would need to know to play this game. And I'm probably going to go through this book in its entirety at some point, especially if people like this video and you want me to hear me talk about just the books all together, because there's a lot in here. I'm probably going to do like another list sort of video that's, top X things that players miss in the handbook, because there's a lot of information here, and it's really easy to skip over some of it, and it's very important that you don't. And it's, it's not easy to remember every single thing in this book, but the important stuff can be missed, and I want to be able to talk about that at some point, but that's not the video now. The video now is about other books, because if you're a player, this is about the only book you need. If you're a DM, like me, you're going to need two more, which is the Dungeon Master's Guide, which I didn't grab because I'm a moron, and the Monster Manual. The Monster Manual is also known as the Husband Catalog, if you're one of those types. Sure, why not? See you, buddy. I guess you saw that I was recording. But yeah, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master Guide is important for DMs, obviously. I'm probably going to do another video talking about that. Same thing. For the DM guide, it'll be, top X things that you miss in the DM guide. In this, it'll be probably just the most dateable. Maybe. You don't know, but Dungeons & Dragons is all about expanding the pool of knowledge. And they're very good about publishing supplemental material, in that these are books that you don't need to play the game of Dungeons & Dragons. You don't need these to have a good game. You honestly don't really need a good number of books. Like, if you really just have the Player's Handbook, you're good. If you have the Dungeon Master's Guide, you're good. A DM can get away with having 3 books. A player can have 1, and you're solid. But, after so many years of playing, it's easy to kind of run the course of those books, and you need more to spice your game up. Or you want to take your group as a DM and take them to a different setting or location or environment with different rules, and a book helps explain those rules a lot more clearly. So this video is going to be talking about my favorite supplemental books. These are books that I personally enjoy and use fairly frequently to help enhance my game. Now, some of these are what are called modules, which are entire campaign guides that a DM can use to take their players and put them into the world of this book. And the book will tell you how to set up the story, where the hooks go, and where the narrative of the story goes on, and all of that. That being said, as a DM, we're going to be talking DM to DM now. You don't have to use the book like that. These books, because they're supplemental, you can use them more or less any way you want. And that means that you could use them as just purely supplemental. You want to take snips and scraps from one book and grab a little bit from another book and put it into your campaign that's all your own. Do it. That's what I do. And I don't get that many complaints, as far as I know. But yeah, if you have the chance to get any of these books, or at least read them, give them a shot, because they have a lot of great information that will enhance your game and at the very least, have a lot of extra inspiration. Ooh, I'm going to pause the stream for a moment, apparently, because I have a phone call. I guess that's the better part of having a stream, is that I can just stop and take a second. But it was just a phone call, no big deal. So, supplemental books. Take them, dog. Hey, buddy. So, supplemental books. You don't need them. You don't need to follow them completely to the letter, but it's good to have them. And good job, buddy. Good job. So, supplemental books. So these are my 5 favorite supplemental books for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So first off is one of the newer books. It came out November of last year, and that is Eberron. Okay, so this book is one that came out really recently. It was about November of 2019. That is Eberron, Rising from the Last War. This is a great retelling of a classic D&D setting. Eberron is one of the older D&D settings. It's been around for, I believe, since first edition, but probably since second edition. So a very long time. And it's a great different environment. Instead of the more traditional sword and sorcery fantasy setting, Eberron is more steampunky, obviously. It's more steampunk, it has dinosaurs, and it has this great story about a war and how a world, a society deals with the aftermath of a war. And it's a big one. And there's some great things in here. There are and there's great things in here. There's new classes that are always fun, new races, and there's a lot of what do I call it? Intrigue. Hi, buddy. And there's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of political dealings, a lot of politics, a lot of not necessarily combat oriented, although there is a lot of good combat, but there's also a lot of interpersonal stuff to do in Eberron. There's a lot of factions and things like that. And then, of course, you got, robot people and robots in general, artificers, defenders. It's a big, it's almost like a big, like, gang war almost. Not quite, but it's about dealing with war. And it's very interesting. It has a lot of great worlds. One of my criterion for what makes a good supplemental book is having a lot of new information as well as very detailed information. So one of the things I like is, well, this one, if you want an airship in your campaign, Eberron is where to do it. So you can get an entire damn airship. Flying ship, super fun. And it also just lays out the schematics of it. So this is the schematics. This is what it'll look like. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the detail of stuff like that. And the more detail is always the better. Car. I always appreciate a supplemental book with maps. These are actually pretty simple maps. They're not colored or anything like that, but they're very straightforward. And it's hard to see from a distance, but they are grid laid out. So the fact that they're on a grid makes it a lot easier to plan things out accordingly. And otherwise, it's a very good book. Admittedly, it's a little tricky to finish because it's very long and very complicated. It's a lot of, this group with this group. There are marks that denote you for certain clans or whatever. Or they give you extra abilities. They're kind of like feats, kind of, sort of. It's complicated. But yeah, Eberron, number 5, very good. Give it a read. 4th, was that the right one? I believe so. So 4th is another good one. Another one that I like a lot, obviously. It's on my top 5. So number 4 is Volo's Guide to Monsters. And Volo's Guide to Monsters came out in November of 2016. So it's a little older. It's one of the more recent supplemental books that came out. And what it has that's very fun is a lot of monster lore. So obviously it's a guide to monsters. So it tells you about monsters, and there's a lot of fun ones. And it takes existing kind of classes of monsters and adds more to them. So you have, illithids and things like that, or mind flayers, and there's more of them, and there's more ways to play them. There's a lot of really weird and kind of creepy stuff. This book is very creepy in their art, in their style, in their way they design monsters, it's much more like horror themed, which is fine. If you like horror, this is a good book. But yeah, it takes a lot. It expands on existing information, which is really good. Like this book really does take what exists in the monster manual and dives headfirst into it and says, "Hey, here's even more information you can do with it." And the best part about it is that it takes what are traditionally like evil or negatively aligned races and gives them a lot more lore and gives them a lot more character. So, like, imagine when you think of an orc, an orc is a marauding gang of thugs that, pillage everything in sight. But this one will allow you to understand that orcs have a very tribal nature to them, and they're not quite religious zealots, but they're soldiers, and they are people who are they are a race of honor among battle sort of deals. So in this book, it'll show you how to play as an orc. If you want to be an orc, not just a half orc like in the player's manual, but if you want to just be an orc, this will show you how to do it and how the personality of orcs work, how their alliances and all that works. Same thing with kobolds, those little dragon folk. They're cute. They're fun. If you want to roleplay a hag, you can roleplay a hag if you want to. There's a lot of lore, and it also has a lot of the good secondary or supplemental races. If you heard about a lot of new races showing up in like your favorite D&D podcast, like Furbolgs or Goliaths or Tabaxi, Lizard Folk, Asimars, that's all here. That's all here. If you want to be Asimar, which is kind of like a reverse tiefling, so instead of being descendant from a lineage of demons, Asimar are descended from a lineage of angels, that sort of deal. Furbolgs, which are kind of giants, kind of. Kenku, crow people. Crow people are always fun. Or Kenku, crow people. Crow people are always fun. They're very cute. Tabaxi, cat people. So this is great for if you wanted, as a player, you might actually want this book. This is a good one that is good for DMs, but I do recommend it for players as well because it has optional races that you might like. Eberron has that too, and a lot of these have them that have extra races or extra classes, and it's good to have that. And that's what also makes a good supplemental book is the ability to work not just for DMs but for players. So this one I almost recommend more for players. This one's really good for having new races and new ways to play as a player. Otherwise, for DMs, it is very good. But if you're a player, keep an eye out for this one. And it should be pretty cheap because it's one of the older books. Let's see. Number three. Let me go through this really quick. I know you're just watching me read right now. Isn't that like super exciting? No, I mean, it's not like anyone's watching currently, so I just get to read and enjoy myself. Okay, cool. Research done. Yep, you watched me read for like 3 minutes. You're welcome. Okay, so number 3 is Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. This is also a fairly new one. This one came out in May of 2018, and it expands a lot about demons and devils. So if you want to send your players to hell, this is the way to do it. This is a great, almost endgamey content because, again, you're going to hell. And a lot of these bosses are really, really scary. They're really big. You're fighting almost gods, pretty much. So it stats a lot of the big baddies of hell. And it gives a lot of lore, which is great. So this one isn't super like module. It's not quite really a module. It's more of information because it doesn't guide you by the hand saying this is what you need to do. This book talks about the rules and the history of hell, and specifically of something called the Blood War. Now, the Blood War is something that's very old in D&D, and it shows the dichotomy of hell, this split of ideology. So there in hell, there are demons and devils. And if I remember correctly, demons, let me just get my book and I'll find out myself. Actually, I don't have to stand up. It's in the monster manual. I'm going to do more research because I'm bad at doing research ahead of time, but here we are. Yeah, Mordecai just has a lot of really cool stuff about hell, the rules of hell. Yeah, there are some big, scary bastards in here. Did they stat? Started Baphomet. Why didn't they stat Asmodeus? Anyway. Okay, so let's start that over again. So number 3. So number 3 is Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Now, this is a great, what I'd call endgame book, because if your characters are very high level or just so stupidly overpowered that you have a hard time really throwing challenges at them, the default thing to do is to send them to hell. Just throw them into hell and see what they do, because who knows? Hell is terrifying, and it's full of big monsters that are just there to kill you. It's great. And this book expands a lot more on the rules of hell, which is weird to say that there's rules, but there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of factions in hell, and there's 2 very big ones. And this book talks about the Blood War. And what is the Blood War? The Blood War is an old thing in D&D that exposes the dichotomy of hell. And hell itself is split into 2 warring factions, demons and devils. Now, we tend to think of them as interchangeable, but in D&D, they're very different ideologically. And the big difference is the idea of order and chaos. They're both evil. They both want power and absolute rule with strength and all that. But the way they do it is so different that they've been at war with each other for millennia, and that's kind of keeping them in check from just getting onto our plane of existence and killing us all. So, demons are about chaos. They are all chaotic evil, which means just raw, brute strength and power and murder, death, destruction, murder, death, kill over and over and over again. That's how demons do. And they are mad at the devils. The devils are bureaucratic. They're lawful evil, which means that they have a lot of very strict rules and would rather govern through absolute totalitarian power, which is a lot more underhanded, scheming, planning, plotting, but that doesn't mean that they won't have a completely strictly regimented army that can just kill anyone at any time, all the time. So the demons and devils are fighting. The girls are fighting, and they really are. And it's, if you are sent into hell because your DM kind of hates you, or you probably deserved it. I mean, as a DM, you probably deserved it. If that's the case, this will give you the rules on how it works, how the Blood War has existed for so long, and it has a lot of secrets. And what it really has, which is great for DMs, is that it puts stats onto gods, or devils, pretty much. If you want to throw your enemies, if you want to have a big bad, like a big bad enemy for your group, and the task is just too simple, then why not just throw just an entire legion of hell against them that just send, Zariel, who is the guardian of the first level of hell. There are 9 levels of hell. And she guards level 1. And she has a challenge rating of 26. She bested Tiamat to rule the first level of hell. Tiamat, the 5-headed dragon demon goddess that everyone knows as the big bad ever. She took her place. So if you want to throw your party against that, by all means. By all means, go for it. Moloch. Moloch is one of the oldest demons to ever exist in the game. You see his picture in, I think, the original Player's Handbook. Very old. Very scary. Also, a challenge rating of 21. And those are just the devils. You have the demon lords, who are, the lords of demons, and how their cults work, and how their cults operate, and how to infiltrate them, and their secrets. And then you can go against, Jewablex, just an oozing eldritch god. Why not? Just send them to them. There's, the Dark Prince of the Drow, more or less, who just causes madness, causes everyone to go insane. Graz, who's admittedly very sexy. Very, very sexy. But terrifying in his own way. This also has a really cool trivia note in it, which is, I just went past it. There was a monster here in this book designed by a kid, I believe, who, I guess his Make-A-Wish, I believe it was Make-A-Wish, was to design a monster for Dungeons and Dragons, which is really cool. And of course, they let him do it. And what he happened to create was one of the most terrifying monsters to ever exist, which is a little unnerving as I'm kind of digging through it. Where to go? Oh, yeah, there you go. The Elder Obelix. See that dude there? That's not the Elder Obelix. That red thing is, with all the skulls in the background, the screaming faces. This was designed by a child, or just Obelixes in general were designed by a kid, I believe the rules were, and they can impersonate people. They can almost exact impersonations. Beyond that, they can eat memories. They are just terrible. They're like breeds of oozes that eat memories, and because they eat memories and people, they can assume the forms of those people. Very terrifying. Big, scary, and bad. But good design. Good design. But yeah, this is a great end game book. This one is mostly for DMs. I'm going to tell you now. This is mostly for DMs. If you want to send your players to the final boss, the big final boss, send them to hell, courtesy of Mordenkainen. All right. Drink time. Number 2. Number 2 is one of my favorite books for just environment. I know we just talked about how cool and fascinating hell is, but what I like a lot in a book is detail and maps. I'm a big sucker for maps. I love maps because I steal them from the books. I don't steal them, but I use them a lot. And they're very helpful. And the more intricate and detailed a map is, the more I like it. And it gives a lot more in the world. And this is a great book because of that, and as well as its history. It has a very good history. And that is Tomb of Annihilation. Tomb of Annihilation is an amazing book, and it just came out in September of 2017. And it's an updated version of what is arguably the most popular dungeon module in Dungeons and Dragons history, like ever. And that was, based on Tomb of Horrors. Tomb of Horrors is so iconic in D&D. It's been referenced in other media. My personal recollection of when it was referenced was in the book Ready Player One, where you pretty much, the character had to know what Tomb of Horrors was to advance through the virtual reality game. But regardless, this is an update to 5th edition of the classic module of Tomb of Horrors. It's very good. It has beautiful maps, and I believe this one has a. I believe it does. It has a removable map. Some of these books, they have maps that you can actually tear out and use as posters. That's where I'm gonna set up my regular videos, is by that wall of all the maps. But this one is great because it has fun puzzles. It has riddles. It has just great story. So what is Tomb of Horrors? What is Tomb of Annihilation? Because I'm talking about, oh, how good is it? How great is it? I didn't tell you what it is. So what it is you go to, or your party goes to, this island called Chult. And it is just a terrible Jurassic Park, massive jungle environment that the people there talk about this tomb, this old relic of a tomb where supposedly great treasure and all that exists, and a great terrible evil, of course. There's dinosaurs. There's a lot of like African and South American influences in this, and the maps are just really fun. Like, there's an old abandoned city that has a map that I love. I love this so much. Look at the detail, how oriented it is. It's very pretty. It has a lot of cool, just a lot of cool information. And of course it has the big bad, a Sararak, a Lich. Because again, if you want to go big, you throw a Lich in there. But a Sararak notwithstanding, who is just an undead mage of terrible power who has the ability to just stop time. 9th level spell, 2 slots, time stop, and power word kill. He can just kill you instantly if you wanted to. He can cast spells at will on a legendary action. He can Ray of Frost forever, Mind Blank. He can maze you. He can send you to another dimension of a maze forever. But more importantly, much more importantly, it has the Almirage. The Almirage, that's a friend right there. That right there, that's a friend. But yeah, this is a great book. It is one of the ones that it's just fun to read by itself. And beyond that, it has great pacing. It sets up dungeons as well as outdoor environments. So it's part dungeon crawl, part tomb exploration. It's just an all-around great book. I really do love it a lot. And if you have a chance, this is, again, mostly for DMs. This is a great one. This is a great one to just, especially if you're having trouble, like, it's hard to make your own campaign. It's hard to make one from scratch. So I kind of recommend this one for like newer DMs who want to start running a game but don't feel up to it is a challenge to create an entire world and story because it's very hard to do that. So start with this. Just throw them into Tomb of Horrors. I believe, if I remember correctly, that you can start at level 1. You can start this campaign at level 1. So with your new players, you can just run this as is. It will tell you what to do. It will tell you who all the main players or the characters are, all the maps, all the people. It'll even tell you like what to say. It'll have these little grayed out blocks that are meant for the DM to read as a way to introduce you to the idea of descriptive storytelling or narrative storytelling, because and as a tip for DMs, I'm going to just have a DM tip in general video at some point. The more descriptive you are in how you describe things, the much better off you'll be for it. And your players will really appreciate that. And this is a great book for doing that because most books do this, but I love how this one does it. It has these little gray blocks And these little gray blocks here are for you, the DM. It's for you to read. So let's find where it starts. Location shows the Bay, Camp Righteous. There's a specific section on latrines, apparently. Don't know. You can bet on dinosaur races, which is pretty funny. Yeah, it just gives you all these characters. Here we go. Okay, so this, yeah, so it'll tell you, read. It'll tell you here, like, read this. Start reading from here, and you read the little gray block. So I'll read this one. You appear in a tropical city under the blazing sun. Right there, it sets you up. It sets your characters up, and they know what a hot sun feels like. So it sets them up. Tropical city in a blazing sun. You appear in a tropical city under the blazing sun. The familiar sounds of a harbor, creaking ropes, slapping waves, heavy barrels rolling across cobblestones, mingle with voices shouting and cursing in an unfamiliar language filled with clicks, inhalations, and sing-songy words that make it sound almost musical. It's a little racist, but we'll let it go. It's a little infantilizing, but we'll talk about that another time. The aroma of unfamiliar spices and tropical fruit mixes with the wharf-side smells of fish, tar, and canvas. Beyond all that, Port Nyanzaru is an explosion of color. Buildings are painted bright shades of blue, green, orange, and salmon pink, or their walls are adorned with murals portraying giant reptiles and mythical heroes. Every building sports baskets and clay urns of colorful flowers, or is draped in leafy, flowering vines. Minstrels in bright clothing adorned with feathers and shells perform on street corners. Multicolored pennants and sun awnings flutter atop the city walls. A crowd of children dressed in feathered hats and capes races past you, squealing in delighted terror as a street performer costumed as a big-toothed lizard stomps and roars behind them. The whole city seems to be bustling, sweating, laughing, swearing, and singing. Like, that's great. Like, that's amazing. This is one of my favorite books, just period. So one of my favorite supplemental books. And this is one I always recommend to new DMs that want to run a game but have a hard time creating a new one. So again, there's nothing wrong. I'm going to tell you right now, there's nothing wrong with using a module. These are great. They are designed to be fun. It's the same way that, people will play video games, but they won't make their own. Like, you don't have to do that. You can enjoy the game by itself. So this one and Curse of Strahd in general, I like those two as modules for DMs who want to start a game and want a good jumping point. And this is one I like more because it has a lot of really inspiring stuff that will hopefully inspire new DMs to make their own stories. And because really, this module is more or less plays by the rules of just plain 5th edition. It doesn't add that many new rules and things like that. And it's fun. It's really fun. I like it. Enjoy it. Get this one when you can. This one is for DMs. Like, in terms of favorite supplemental books that's my number one, still better. But yeah, give this book a shot. You're going to like it. Give it a read. DMs, put your players through this. They're going to like it too. I'm not sick, I promise. I've just been talking for 45 minutes straight. Give me a break. Okay, moving on. I have a few honorable mentions. Not that many. My main honorable mention are the books that are, how would I call this? My first honorable mention are supplemental books from places that aren't Dungeons and Dragons or are fan-made quote unquote. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that it's bad to be fan made, but these are ones that are designed to either take you to a world or a place that isn't originally designed for Dungeons and Dragons. Like Curse of Strahd was always Dungeons and Dragons. Tomb of Annihilation was always Dungeons and Dragons. But there are ones that are like the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Now this is Wizards' collaboration with Magic the Gathering, which takes players from the traditional fantasy world of Dungeons and Dragons and sends them to Ravnica, which is arguably the most popular plane or region in Magic the Gathering history. And Ravnica is very fun. It's centered on guilds. There are 10 distinct guilds that everyone is aligned to. They are pillars of industry and government, and guilds run everything. So you are, as a player, you are usually part of a guild, and it's up to you to stop. There's a lot of great hooks. There's a lot of really good hooks on here because Ravnica is a very interesting plane of partially of politics, secrets, as well as like just war. It's great. There's a lot of conflict. Ravnica is all about conflict because these 10 guilds only barely get along with each other. So I highly recommend it. It's really good. And if you ever get a chance, especially if you're a Magic the Gathering fan, play Guilds of Ravnica. Play Guildmaster's Guide. It's really, really fun. If you are this is for DMs. If you are a DM who likes Magic and maybe wants to introduce your players to the world of Magic, this is good. If you are a DM that likes Magic and your players like Magic, absolutely play this. It's really good. But because it's not like strictly D&D, it's more of a collaborative experience. It doesn't have a lot of universality to it. And I think that's the thing about the honorable mentions, that they're very specific. And what I mean by specific, I mean stuff like Tal'Dorei, the campaign. This is the Critical Role campaign setting, which admittedly I like. And this is what brought a new generation of Dungeons and Dragons and fans together. Critical Role was the starting point for so many people. It only makes sense that they created their own book. And it's a good book. And it is, but this is a module in the very strictest of ways, or not super strict, but it is a module. This is mostly a way to tell the story of the first generation Critical Role. It's very good. I like it. I like it a lot. But it's weird because these are the type of campaigns that it's a little challenging to run. Because why is it challenging to run? You have a lot of extra challenges when running an existing story that has characters that exist outside of the game. It's the reason why, like, the Battlestar Galactica role-playing game is kind of tricky, or Star Trek, Star Wars, things like that. Because the players will already have in their mind an interpretation of characters that you as a DM might challenge. And because of that, you might have a little bit of like a player disconnect where they're going to be like, oh, that player doesn't do this, or that player is not supposed to do that. And it leads to unnecessary like disconnect into the role playing. That being said, it is a fun story. And if you start your game by saying, hey, this is, if you're a DM, like, hey, I'm going to run the Tal'Dorei campaign, it's going to be a little different than how you remember the podcast, how you remember Critical Role. And as long as they're okay with that, it's fine. So that's why this one is an honorable mention, because it's very specific and it has a lot of challenges that the other books don't have. I think my last honorable mention, I can't find the other one, but oh well. My last honorable mention is strictly supplemental. Very little story to it. Tea. And that are those. So my last honorable mention are the Table Fables book. I only have Table Fables 2 because I can't find the other one. But Table Fables are just self-published by Madeline Hale. She is amazing. She makes these very general sets of tables that you can roll dice and randomly create characters. You can randomly create stories. You can randomly create items. So what do I mean by that? So let's go to items. It'll get, if you go to items, they will give you like a list like this. And it will say, you know, here's pocket filler. You roll a d20, and if you roll that, you get any of these. So let's say I rolled a 16. You get a book. And what I like about this is that what I like about it, weirdly enough, is that it's vague. It doesn't give you like, oh, and it doesn't give you an entire narrative to build off of. It just gives you little stuff. And it makes you, as the DM, fill in the blanks in a really good way. And I like it. And the other thing about it is that this is not strictly Dungeons and Dragons. It's just general tabletop role-playing games. In theory, you could use this for anything, but just a typical fantasy stuff. It's really good. The first two I have, and they're amazing. There's a third one that I need to get. They're on Amazon. Table Fables, support, you know, small publishers. Go for it. Get it. I like it. I am drying the fuck out of my mouth. Okay, I took my breather because this next one is going to be a long one because I love it. Despite being a very like tiny book in comparison to hell, even like the Guildmaster's Guide book, it's small, it's pretty small. But this is arguably one of my most used supplemental books. I use this constantly. And that's what really put it to number one, is the fact that this one can be used all of the time. It's not specific to this narrative or this one storyline. You can use this anytime you want, all the time. And that is Xanthar's Guide to Everything. This book is amazing. This book was made in 2017, and it is arguably the best for DMs. It's also really good for players because it has a lot of information for players. But this is arguably the best for DMs because it gives you information on things that make DMing so much easier. This is such a quality of life improving book for DMs that it's almost a have to buy. Like you kind of have to get this because it's so good. Like so I'll just go like in order of like what the book shows. So the first thing is for the players, it has a lot of new information of subclasses. So it doesn't give you a new class like how Eberron gives you artificers, or how it doesn't give you new races. It doesn't give you how like Volo's Guide gives you furbolgs and things like that. Instead, it gives you the existing 9 classes, and it gives you more. What it does is that it takes the existing classes and gives additional subclasses to them for players who want to expand the idea of what the characters do or what their players want to do. So what I mean by that. So clerics. So clerics have a lot of So what do I mean by that? Well, let's go to barbarians. Barbarians kind of only have 2 subclasses. Path of the Berserker and Path of the Totem Warrior, I believe is what they are. And they're great. They're really good. But if you're a barbarian and you want to play barbarian and you want to have a few more options, this book will give it to you. It'll give you 3 more. It'll add more totems for you. It will give you the subclass for barbarians are primal paths. So it'll give you the Path of the Ancestral Guardian. So these are ones who call for their guardian spirits to aid them. It will give them, like ancestral protectors, spirit shields, Path of the Storm Herald. They'll have like a literal like storm brewing within them, so they can create terrain effects more or less. Path of the Zealots are kind of they're kind of paladins. They're kind of like if you are a paladin but a barbarian as well, where it gives your rage like divine fury and things like that. It's cool. It gives these a lot of options. Bards. Bards only have 2 colleges, College of Valor and College of Lore. But now it has Muses, the College of Glamour, the College of Swords, the College of Whispers, which is like secrets and stuff like that. All the classes have this. All the classes will have new subclasses that will allow for a greater depth of character building. And it's really good. It gets these great options for players. Wizards. You ever want to be like a war wizard? You can do war magic. Go for it. Why not? And that's the only new one because wizards have a lot of options. Anyway, wizard privilege. Really? Am I right? But yeah, it'll give you a way to create backstories for your characters. Reasons why you create your class. Feats. Feats are a big thing in Dungeons and Dragons, and this one will give you feats based on your race, which is not a thing in the Player's Handbook. And then there's the DM tools, and DM tools are amazing. They're absolutely amazing. They're so good, and I can't recommend it more. This has it answers so many questions that the Dungeon Master's Guide brings up but doesn't really answer themselves, or does it kind of vaguely. And this book gives you all the specifics. So what do I mean by that? Random encounters. It will give you random encounters, which is really helpful. Spellcasting, how to identify spells, things like that. There's a specific section on just how to tie a knot, what it means to tie a knot, right? Traps. The Dungeon Master Guide talks about how to make traps, and this tells you how to do it a little bit better. Items. This one gives what are called common items, or common magical items. One of the big issues with the Dungeon Master's Guide, and with DMs in general, I see a lot, is when do I give players magic items? Or how do I give players magic items? Is there just a store that players can go to and buy magic items? Or is it something they find? And there's a lot of debate about that. And there's no right or wrong answer, of course. But I think the big reason that discussion exists is because there aren't really any kind of weak magic items that you can give to early level players without feeling like you accidentally overpowered them. There's a few that exist in the Dungeon Master Guide, but this gives a lot more. So you don't feel bad about giving your players magic items at early levels, because these ones are they're designed to be quote unquote common. So they do fairly simple things, but they work, and they're good, and they're fun. They add a lot of just flair and personality to your characters. What's the one that I love? The Cloak of Billowing, wondrous item, common. While wearing this cloak, you can use a bonus action to make it billow dramatically. That's it. That's all it does. But it's really funny, and my players always get a kick when they get it. It makes them feel good. And it allows you as the DM to provide these items for characters who may want more magic items than the DM guide will provide. What's my favorite one? One of my 2 favorite things in this, and that's toward the end. Downtime. So DMs, I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever run a campaign where you give your players just time to do whatever they want? They arrive at a new city, and you arrive at a new city, and the big monster isn't going to show up for a week or whatever. And you tell your players, go do what you want. And your players look at you like, what am I going to do? Like, what do you mean? What do I do? This will give you information on how to do downtime, on what players will do on their quote unquote off time in game, because sometimes there's more to do than just I go to the store, I look for magic items. That's it. That's usually what players do all the time. Like, I'm gonna go to the store, I'm gonna go get clothes, I'm gonna go to the library, which is fine. I mean, it's fine, but it can get a little boring. So this book will tell you how to let your players do other things. And what other things do I mean? Stuff like carousing. Your player can just go drinking and just blackout partying for a while, and it'll make you roll. It'll make your player do checks with certain DCs, and depending on whether they succeed or fail, different outcomes will show up, and maybe that'll be a hook. Maybe your character fails at a carousing check, and it ends up causing a complication. This will tell you what a complication is. Maybe carousing complication. You tripped and fell during a dance, and people can't stop talking about it. You become just this laughing stock of the city. Who knows? Maybe a low-class carousing complication. Number 6, surprise, you're married. You blacked out drunk one night, and you woke up and you're married. And that's the story right there. This will tell you how to craft an item, because sometimes you want to just create your own items. You can create potions. You can create armor. You can create tools. This will tell you how to do it. You need time and money, of course, but you can do it. Gambling. You can just go commit crime. One of the things on here for downtime, go commit crime. Just go rob people. See what happens. One of the complications for crime is that the person you robbed goes to your party as a group to try and find the person that robbed them, which is a very funny one. That's a very funny hook. I suggest trying that. Gambling. Pit fighting. This is always the fun one. If you ever have a barbarian in your group or a fighter, they're going to ask when there's downtime can I go fight someone? And now you can be like, yes, here's pit fighting. You can relax. You can attend religious services. Clerics do that. Research. Wizards will do that. You can make a spell scroll. You can sell a magic item. You can just work. You can train. All these things. But yeah, this is arguably this is my favorite, just without question, because I use it all the time. And the other thing I love about this is, one, it gives like new spells, which is great. You can make a tiny servant, which means you can take any like small object and just animate it to make it a little robot. And the picture is great because it's a little tankard of beer that just walks around. I love it. There's new spells. Toll the Dead. If you ever heard the spell Toll the Dead, that's in this book. Very good. And my other favorite thing, it's such a small one, but this is like one of my favorite things. And this is the thing I use probably the most frequently in this book, meaning I use it almost every single time I run a D&D session. I use this part of the book because at some point, this will always happen, your players will run into a character that you didn't think of a name for. You need to think of one on the spot. And that's very hard. So this book just has an appendix of names. Just a few pages of names. Just names and names and names. And it specifies them. You can do like elf names, dragonborn names, halfling names, human names based on like Arabic names or Egyptian, Chinese, German, all of that. This is an absolutely amazing book. As a DM, this is almost required reading. Like, you have to get this. If you want to run a campaign and you never want to feel like you are caught off guard, if you want to feel like you're prepared for every single session, because it's hard to do that. You can plan everything you want to the nth degree, and you can still miss something. This fills in all those details. This fills in all those missing pieces. And this will save you so many times. Players, if you want to add more spice to your character, to your class, get this book. Get this book. It's so good. This, like, far and away. Like, sometimes my lists are very like, oh, this is close. This is close. No, I use this all the time. And if you get this book, you're going to use it all the time. I promise you this. get Xanthar's Guide to Everything. You're not going to regret it. And thank you. And thank you all for watching for an hour, for a long time. But thanks you guys for watching. I'm probably going to stream more D&D, probably at least once a week, maybe more, depending on how bored I am. But if you get a chance, give me a like, subscribe if you want. Check me out on Twitter, Twitch, all those sorts of things. And I will be answering your questions next stream, or probably a little bit later, maybe on Instagram or something like that. And then check me out for another video soon. It'll probably be another list. Thanks for watching.